Today's video is the final one celebrating Batman Beyond's 25th anniversary, and the topic was chosen by you. I put a poll on my socials a couple months ago asking who you'd like to see for this month, and Terry McGinnis in his brown jacket paired with Ten from the Royal Flush Gang won out. Let's not waste any more time and get started. Choosing a body for Terry was a bit of a big decision because it comes with the choice of keeping the scale DC Collectibles made for him or going bigger. You see, I think they made their Terry Batman figure a little too small compared to his size on the show. I also think they made Bruce too big, so unfortunately when placed together they look like they're from two different lines. My eventual plan is to make a bigger Batman, so I went with a bigger Terry body for the base. You'll notice that Terry has thin gray pants, and the BTAS line already has someone with those legs as well as a similar build. Who might that be, you ask? Edward Nygma, of course. He scales larger than their Batman like I wanted, but a little too tall when compared to Bruce. We should be able to just trim some torso down to fix that though. Fortunately, we'll even be able to use the entire body too, since Terry needs that all-important jacket. Trimming the torso will solve a little issue I've had with this figure too. His forearms are too short for his proportions, and taking his height down should even those out nicely. Now, whose head would work for him? I have this Terry head cast I bought online, but it's going to be too small. It worked for the Batman body, but as we've seen, that figure is too small. How about Jason Todd or a BTAS Robin? Jason looks a little too big, but Robin seems like he might be the right size. Let's try him. We have our parts, so let's get to work. The first thing we need to decide on is how much of the Riddler's coat we can use. Looking at the reference, we should be able to cut out the middle and then add on his rounded collar with epoxy. Simply mark out where you want to cut the coat, then heat it up for a little extra pliability. Follow your lines with an X-Acto knife a few times and you've got it. Before sculpting the new collar, we'll want to Dremel off Nygma's lapels and then smooth that area out. Next, Dremel off the shirt collar and tie and sand or scrape the chest smooth. I mentioned cutting Riddler's height down, and we can do that by comparing him to screen caps of Bruce and then marking the line, heating him up, and cutting it off. That's looking much better and should work nicely. Now we can get started on sculpting. We'll start our epoxy sculpt up at his neck to smooth out where the old shirt collar was, since Terry will only be wearing a t-shirt. Once that starts curing, move down to the legs to give him his pant cuffs, and then the bit of his belt that will show between his jacket. You can do the whole thing if you'd like, but you can also save yourself a little time since you won't see it. Dremel down and sand the cuffs to refine or thin them if you made them too thick, and do the same for the other recent additions. We also need to Dremel further up into the waist in order to get the legs to connect back into the shorter torso. Next, we can come back up to the neck to start drawing and sculpting Terry's distinctly shaped shirt collar. The next bit to sculpt will be the stripes on the arms of his jacket, 2 on each bicep. Then the jacket needs the rounded pop collar look sculpted over the Riddler's old lapels. Now we can also start revising Robin's head to work for Terry. He needs a bigger hole in his neck to fit Riddler's neck peg. The mask needs to be Dremeled, sanded, and scraped, and his hair spike shapes need to be trimmed off. I'll also end up sculpting over Robin's smile since Terry is much more straight-faced and serious all the time. The last bit will be adding the appropriate amount of hair to match Terry, and I ended up needing to do it in 3 layers. Sand any part that hasn't been touched yet and he'll be ready to add some paint. Terry has a simple setup: gray pants, black shirt, brown coat, and his skin color, with a few extra highlights from the gray in his hair, light gray on his jacket, pockets and belt buckle, and then the brown belt and shoes. I'll start with his skin since it's the underlying color at his neck. Then add the black shirt on top, followed by the brown jacket. While the brown is out, I'll apply it to his belt and shoes. Grab your light gray for the jacket stripes, and then we'll use it for his pocket shapes on his pants too. For his pants, I started out with this gray, but then I realized I needed to mix up a darker color to match his model better. Paint up the face details carefully, and then his hair, and then do any cleanup or final coats needed everywhere else. The last things I had to do were to add some contour putty at his wrist joints and waist to allow the hands to stay in and body to stay together. He's all assembled now and looking really nice. McFarlane released their own Terry head sculpt with the clear blue Batman, quick Blueberry Terry review linked above, a few months after I made mine, and admittedly it's a far better likeness than mine, but he's unfortunately too small to fit on this body, since it was made for the smaller Batman like I mentioned before. Terry ended up befriending Ten in the Royal Flush Gang's debut episode, so let's see how I made Melanie's character. My custom figure of Ten was one of my very first few customs, and as such I didn't have nearly as much fodder to choose from to make her. BTAS Harley was one of only a few female figures available at the time, but I still think I would probably keep that same recipe even today. Luckily, she too is able to use the whole figure, and this time even the head. We'll start out dremeling Harley's torso details off and then slimming down the wrist cuffs. Cut off the wings on her shoes and her pigtails from her mask. Like Terry's mods to the Robin head, we'll take off her mask and then sculpt on a new mouth. She'll also need a little 10 sculpted onto her chest, but aside from that, not too many modifications before painting. She has an even simpler color scheme than Terry, with only black, white, and red for the eyes. Her most obvious and necessary accessory is a playing card to fly on. I cut out the right size piece of cardboard for her and then made a simple Photoshop file of the spade for the top and a gray rectangle for the bottom. Scale them to print the right size and glue them to each side of the thin cardboard. Now, this next part may be tough to recreate because these stands have since been discontinued. What I really liked about them is that you clip the figure in with the waist holder, but then there's this additional piece included that I've used to make the card look like it's floating. Check it out, pretty sweet, right? That wraps up today's video. Drop a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more monthly content like this and occasional shorts featuring tips or additional customs. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see more customs like these and all of my latest work. Hey, thanks for joining me this year in celebrating Batman Beyond's big 25th anniversary. As a bonus treat, here are all of his rogues and other characters I've made to this date. Some of these will have their making of videos next year, so keep an eye out for those. Next year's videos will also bring a good chunk of Superman, TNBA, some BTAS, and a dash of Justice League. The League will even be the focus of the next video. We're going to the future again and looking at an alternate Green Lantern design. This is actually one of the very first user requests, and I'll be making Hal Jordan from JLU with quick glimpses at how you can accurately cel shade your standard figures to match their looks on the show better. Check out the rest of my catalog of videos while you wait for that next one. Have a good one, and happy customizing!